Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this edition of the Tuesday telecast from The Joyful Path, where we are talking in another roundtable format with some people from different places about our earth and how to heal it. How to heal the earth. Healing the earth is going to bring up some different perspectives, I imagine. So let's actually stop listening to me and see if everybody is here. It looks like they are. So let's bring them into the house. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday telecast at the Joyful Path. We are talking today with our group of friends and experts about healing the earth. And where that conversation will lead us, we don't know. That's kind of the fun of it. So I have Dr. Maria Ian, Matt Allen, founder of Kudos, and Jocelyn Arroyo Yount, who is the proprietor of Frog Medicine Healing. And I would love to just have each of you around the table tell about yourselves. And let's start with Jocelyn.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the founder of Frog Medicine Healing, which is my healing business. And where I do a lot of energy work, a lot of we call it grid work, which is like the energetic, they're kind of like the electricians of the earth and the grid lines and the ley lines of the earth. And a lot of shamanic healing work basically. And so I help a lot of people kind of connect back to themselves through connecting to nature. And we are in a day and age where there's a lot of rushing around, a lot of just not being very conscious of the fact that when we are part of nature, we're not like separate from it. And so when we heal ourselves, we kind of make ripples into this world to be able to heal everything else around us. So I focus a lot on that and a lot of energetic work for just helping people to be able to release and remove just a lot of stories and things within themselves that they have been brought up from their lineage and brought up from ancestrally and brought up that causes them to like not be able to move forward in their life, not being able to live a life that feels more whole, causes them to stop really just living a life that's whole. So that's what I do, and that's who I am.
Terrific. Thank you, Jocelyn. And Matt, let's hear about
Hey,
how you are here, what you do.
so my name's Matt Allen. I'm founder of Kudos. I do as little as possible, but as much as humanly possible. I'm trying to do a lot more every day. And what I do really is change the world. I'm trying to find new ways of doing business so that then it benefits all of us. And in the process, use the power of people instead of just the power of powerful people to change the world for the betterment of us all. And that includes changing the planet so that then it's more feasible and more respected by all of us and reward from it for all of us.
Beautiful. Thank you, Matt. And Dr. Maria
Thank
Ian.
you.
Hello, Lydia. Yes, my name is Dr. Maria Ian. I'm the founder of Cave Sound Publishing. I think my books can sort of go under one big heading, which is that I look at how polarization, which is political violence can create violence in more general terms, such as armed conflict, domestic violence, arguments, things of that nature. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to discussing Healing the Earth, which is very, very important to my research as well.
Amazing. Let's and I guess I can introduce myself again. I am Lydia Lowery Busler, and I am the host of The Joyful Path and also the CEO of the Joyful Path Healing. And so I work with energy, and I work with people's energy, and I heal and I remove barriers. So let's go forward and open up this topic. So when I say healing the earth, what is your first impression of what needs to be healed? And what's your first impression of what I'm asking? So whoever would like to hop in on that, please.
Well, if you don't mind me going first, if you do mind, let me know. But if you don't mind, I'll go ahead.
Speak.
Yes, okay. So my first impression when I heard Healing the Earth was, again, the motherland, and the idea that Nazi Germany, the Nazi party, actually used that idea of healing the motherland and sacrality of the earth when it first started out at a very local, basic level before it became national and Hitler and World War II and all of that. So what comes to my mind first is the sacrality of the motherland, the sacrality of belonging. And then your second question was, what needs to be healed? Is that correct? Yes. Well, I do address that at some length in one of my books, because what needs to be healed is the inner self, the person who makes the demand of the motherland, right? And it is a very, very deep topic, because the motherland, or the sacrality of the earth, really can not be returned to its original state in a way in which we humans usually think that we're going to do that, right? By the means of political parties or therapy or redoing relationships, connections, whatever. Because what the person wants healed is something within themselves that requires a return to the original state of what that motherland signifies for the individual. And that path is fraught with many difficulties, one of them being that it can derail quite easily into things such as Nazism, into things such as violence, violent behavior, with the wrong kinds of self-assertion. Revenge is a very, very big factor. Blaming, all those things that then go into these horrible political constructs, right, that we all know about. So that, in a nutshell, is my answer.
All right. Yeah. Anyone else have a different answer?
I always have a different answer, you know what I mean? But I very strongly agree with Maria as well. So what do I think about healing the world? Healing Earth, I think, is tied very closely to the second question as well, in the sense that when I was at school, we learned about ecosystems. We learned about the fact that everything is intertwined and everything comes down to all of it working together to fundamentally operating out of sync doesn't work very well. And we as human beings are not necessarily the problem, but there is a problem with human beings, which is that we are currently out of kilter with what the world needs, what the earth needs, and what we do to it. And that's not necessarily by our own individual choices, but by things that are put in place that are supposed to be for the betterment of the earth, but are not necessarily. We mentioned earlier about, is there some way to connect racing cars with healing the world? Well, what about if we started something with racing cars, with Formula One? Because many things that start in Formula One whittle their way down to your BMW or your Ford or your, I don't know, Land Rover. So how's about we change the way that roads are made? Instead of being made out of something that destroys the earth, we can take something that's currently destroying the earth, like plastic, find a way to put that into a track to race Formula One cars on. And instead of then just having that track for Formula One cars, we figured out a way to use that plastic to replace the stuff that's damaging the earth and take that out of the oceans, recycle that in a proper way that benefits humanity and the earth, and we can use that for roads all around the world. Thinking about things differently, but at the same time thinking about how to heal things through doing things the right way, rather than just the way that makes people the most money.
Mm-hmm. All right. That is so what I've heard so far is that starting really locally at home ourselves and people. And then I've also heard the idea of thinking outside of the box and taking the big system things and opening them up and flipping them on their heads in order to reconfigure the way that they act in our ecosystem. And Jocelyn, what did you think when you heard healing the earth, and what's your idea of this?
I'm sorry, it went out a little bit. Were you
Oh.
speaking?
Yes. What is your idea of what we mean when we say healing the earth? What does this mean to you?
So for me, healing the earth, what that means is, you know, I feel like we heal the earth by healing ourselves. Because one person may not be able to do something, but when you have one or two or three or four people, it becomes a ripple. And so what happens is, for me, that means that, like, when they talk about being the change that you want to see in the world, I feel like that's where that phrase comes from a lot of times, is like, just by being kind to other people, doing things that bring a light to other people, I don't know, a smile to somebody's face or something like that. Also, the other thing is we ourselves, we come with all kinds of things, like stories. We come with all kinds of belief systems. We come with all kinds of stuff that we have taken on from our parents and from our parents' parents and from our great grandparents and so forth and so on. And so a lot of those things aren't necessarily ours. I mean, they're part of our stories because they're part of our lineage, but when we come from a place of saying, hey, that story doesn't fit me anymore. That belief system doesn't fit me anymore in the way that I work or I operate or I live my life, you know. We're able to let those things go. What happens is we are able to live more of like a life that allows us to say, hey, this is me, this is who I am. And instead of living a life that says this is how society is supposed to say this is how we're supposed to live, instead we can say, no, I can live a life that makes me feel more aligned, instead of, trying to do everything for I don't know how to say, like, I don't want to say capitalism because that's not necessarily the thing, but doing where we're able to say, hey, this is who I am, and living more an authentic life and allowing our authentic light to shine out into the world. That light creates a ripple, that creates a ripple of healing to the people around you. That creates a heal, and then that ripple from there goes out further to like your city, to your communities, to your states, to your countries, to the world. And so for healing the earth, on a teeny tiny, that can make the biggest difference in the world. When we do that, I feel like that you can see shifts, just by being you, just by being the beautiful light that you are. So that's where I'm coming from that.
Yeah. When we connect to ourselves, we connect to a source, and we can heal the source as part of ourselves. What is the source of, where do we start? Maybe just if we want to make a difference in ourselves, in the earth, in our community that is not making a good impression on the earth, is making a poor impression on the earth. If we want to become more peaceful, if we want to, all of these things are ways to start. Which one do we choose? How do we, we're just out there, and what do we choose? Where do we start?
Lydia, you're asking really very, very big questions. Huge questions.
That's what I do.
Okay. I want to give a story as an answer, which I think can be very helpful. Something that occurred in my family during World War II. And again, this idea of healing the earth, back then, and I think even today, still also in other conflicts that maybe are not very much popularized in the media and people may not know a lot about, but it's very, very present that the earth, the place where a person has their sense of belonging, is sacred and, should not be violated. And if it is violated, then you watch what will happen, right? So in this one particular instance, the individual noticed, that the place where they were in was going to be overrun by the enemy pretty soon, and with a relatively high rate of success. And they started organizing themselves into armed groups and various, resistance movements and things of that nature underground. And then at a certain moment, you get to the point where you have to take the first step, and when you defend yourself, start some violent action, right? And so the individual was contemplating, I have to take up arms and I have to start the actual military part of self-defense, right? And at that point, there was somebody else in the individual's family who stepped in and said, if you're going to take that step now, which you have to take, because if you don't, you're going to be overrun, right? There is a very high likelihood that you're going to die in the process, right? So is that clear to you, right? That you're making this sacrifice for the sacrality of your motherland, which if you start now, the likelihood is very high you're going to die in the process, right? And because of how that was presented to the individual, who was very intelligent and was able to, think and draw conclusions, that individual decided, even though the whole underground movement resistance was all organized, done, implemented, it's very complex, right? That individual said, okay, so no, I'm not going to, right? And then stepped back and ended up moving to another very different country down the road. In fact, what happened is that whoever was involved in that resistance movement, which was very well thought out, very well organized and all of that, did end up either in prison for decades or did end up dying, right? Because, if you look at it from the overall perspective, the enemy was pretty, and still is today, very pernicious and very well informed. And that individual who said no, and just said, no, I'm leaving, because I had some superior insight, over the course of their lives did a lot to actually heal the earth, by their profession, by what they imparted to others, by how they raised their children, by all of that, right? So I'm giving this as an example, to show that, again, it's, as I think Matt mentioned, to change the system, to change the perspective, to change the framework, which is extremely hard if what you really should do is go with the flow, go with the army, attack and do what you think you've got to do, what you've been brainwashed, trained to do, right? And this is a very beautiful example, because it shows that healing the earth can occur by operating from your higher source, by seeing things differently, by taking the incentive to do things totally differently than what thousands of others have been brainwashed and trained to do, and by taking action. Action is very important to, fulfill the new promise and the new path that one has set for oneself. And this is a very rare story, because most people would just, the majority of people, they would just go with the flow. And still today, they all go with the flow. And I mean, there aren't as many people that are able to do that. So yeah, that's my answer. Listen to the higher source, reframe, listen to the correct voices, the correct opinions that may be a very small majority, and look at the big picture and then take action. Yeah.
There's an idea here of what we do when we have when there's a violation,
Mm-hmm.
a violation of our source, of the land around us, of our family, of ourselves, and what we do with that in response to that violation. And there's really, with curiosity, there's a number of responses that we can make, right? But when we have a violation, we often can't back up to see those choices and to take the time for that curiosity. Even the idea that if one is not attached to a war, but one is just attached to the feeling of violation around them, the feeling of violation in themselves, in their present, in their past, in the land around them, to their ecosystem. This is all, part of ourselves. So as I look at this, do you have any ideas of, or just responses to what it is that we've been doing to respond to violation? How can we respond to violation better? What do we do with this idea of violation?
Forgiveness, love, charity begins at home, spreads all around the world. I think that sure, violation is not a good thing, definitely, because it's um, not good in general. Just simply, the simple answer to violation is forgiveness and the ability to be able to look beyond what the immediate problem is and what the solution is. Because it's the solution that is really the fundamental and most valuable thing to anybody, whether you're the person at the pointy end of the stick, which trust me is not enjoyable. I've been at the end of a few pointy sticks myself. I'm sure we all have. And I know people who've been at the more pointy end of bigger sticks than any stick I could ever imagine. And what all of those people have in common is that none of them want themselves to be at the pointy end of that stick, and they don't want anybody else to be at the pointy end of the stick. The only difference is that we're not the ones who decide who the pointy end of the stick is pointing at. That's the people who are in charge, and that's the problem. Because we need to put down the pointy sticks and start thinking about where the sticks come from in the sense of from earth, and how to make more sticks grow in the sense of trees. Because maybe a tree would be a suitable answer to healing the world, because they're much better than these stupid windmills that we're putting up all over the place. They're much better than electric cars for doing stuff. Trees are fundamentally creation from earth that is here to help Earth. And wouldn't it be great if some of the starving people around the Earth could eat some of the food from things called trees whilst they're actually healing the world as well? That'd be a little miracle of its own, wouldn't it?
Wow. I love that story and that way of putting the simplifying the idea and making it very meaningful. There's a responsibility in that, and it comes to the self. Jocelyn, did you have any idea of this?
Well, I just wanted to say that I loved that story that Dr. Maria Ian, is it Ian or Ian?
Yes.
I love that story because of all the well, no, I'm making a different decision, and the way that I live my life can be an example for everybody else. I love that. And I love, Matt, I loved your whole entire, well, if we just have to look at well, you don't want to be at the end of the pointy stick either, and realizing that kind of we have to like do better by like how do we want to treat other people and how do we want to be in that, you know. And I'm kind of I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that because I feel like those were so beautiful. I do want to maybe just say one thing about like um when we are at the pointy end of the stick, you know, when somebody else is pointing it at us. Something that kind of came up was like, you know, how is also kind of like a reflection a little bit, like looking at like how other systems are or how other how other leaders are or how other people are pointing sticks at us and kind of going like how how am I how am I like that or how am I not like that? Like what can I learn from that as kind of like as a reflection of saying, um, you know, I don't want to treat somebody the way they're treating me. I don't want to, you know, I want to be able to come from a different place as opposed to like I don't know, like the fear or the hate or whatever it is, and kind of also looking at it as a reflection of ourselves of being like, you know, is there something that within that other person or whoever is pointing that stick at me, is there something within myself that I can go, maybe there's something about me and that person that they're kind of the same, instead of like looking at differences, kind of can look at like how we're the same, because a lot of times sometimes I feel like um we're always looking at how things are different in our world, like how things are, we get really divisitory about stuff a lot of times, and sometimes um, that creates a whole lot of chaos instead of trying to like be like, you know, I don't necessarily agree with what you are saying, but you know, I see how we are the same. I see how we all have the same, we all bleed the same, we all have the same skeletal system, we all have the same things. And so maybe sometimes it's looking at somebody who's pointing the stick at us and saying, maybe we can choose to like see where we are the same, you know, where we, instead of trying to divide things so much, a lot of times I feel like I see that so much. It's been really heavy lately, you know. I mean, it's heavy all over the world in general, but it feels very heavy lately. And so it's just looking at it from that place of like maybe where we can love more too, you know, which is very difficult. I feel like with how things are, it's very difficult. But when we can, sometimes if we can like go past the fear and the anger and all these things, not necessarily bypassing them, but looking at it and say, hey, we have some things in common. You know, we may agree to disagree, but we have some things in common. Maybe we are the same a little bit. So I think that's kind of where I wanted to add.
Yeah, there's a lot to do with empathy in that answer. How are we connected? How do we go forward as a part of this rather than separating ourselves from this issue in front of us? The empathy that's involved is the part that we can be responsible for and can lead us to an answer. It sounds like you would you agree with that?
I'd very much agree with that, absolutely. And because I think you mentioned earlier that very accurate sense of violation, that something is violated, and very close together with that goes self-defense, right? And most philosophical systems, including the Christian one, agree that self-defense is very legitimate, and you can't take that away from a person. But if empathy comes in at the right moment. And I do that all the time. I apply that all the time in my life, where even somebody who is pointing a huge stick at you, and you know where they are coming from is aberrant and unreal and fake and made up. Still, if you go into the sacrality of the earth of that person, you are going to find commonalities by way of necessity, because it's the the subconscious of humanity, the universe, that created every single human being, no matter how big the sticks are that they're pointing. Nobody can escape from the fact that every human alive throughout history has been created by the intelligence of the universe. That's just how things work. And no matter how superbly brilliant, intellectual, whatnot you are not going to be able to change that. So empathy, in the sense of going into that sacrality and seeing the common essence that is there, can help in your response to that big stick. I mean, it's not going to enable you to change all of the fakeness and all of the whatever, the propaganda, the whatnot that's at the other end. And it's unrealistic for you to expect that you're going to be able to change that. But it can change your response to the stick in a way that makes it maybe more progressive and more enlightening for humanity. Yeah, empathy is at the root of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and allows us to see.
I think as well, understanding. Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I think as well, then, one of the problems with the world is that we look at people's differences and we find it very easy to point them out.
Yeah.
If we take, for instance, schoolyards and children, and when I was young, before a lot of the political incorrectness existed, we used to play football at lunchtime because I went to an all-boys school. And there was two things happened at lunch. One was we played football, and two was we had fights. And before the fights started, what would happen is that the 2 or 3 boys that would be involved would point these sticks at each other with their fingers, saying, "You're different to us because, I don't know, you wear glasses, or you're a different color to us, or you're fatter or skinnier, or you have strange thing on your head, you don't have any hair, you've got one eyebrow bigger than the other, you've only got one eyebrow." Whatever the difference was about the other kid that was going to fight you, you would try and point that out and try and make everybody else see, yeah, we're more like this guy than we are like that guy. Because having people on your side was the way to win the fight without having to actually take a punch or two. And that is fundamentally what we need to change, is stopping pointing out those differences and realize the commonality between us and the fact that we are all unified through uniqueness. We are all individual, but at the same time, we have so much in common that that's the important thing. It's those commonality things that make us all people and make us all part of Earth and make us all part of the solution rather than the problem. It's just the people at the top like to point out with their pointy sticks. I might hasten to add, look at this one. They're a little bit different to what we want. Let's get rid of them. And then there's innocent blood cost, or cost to the environment. You look at what war does to the environment compared to people living, what that does to the environment. A war would do a lot worse damage. You look at depleted uranium shells, for example, and the damage that they do to not just the earth, not just the human beings that they affect directly, but ongoing damage over however many, many, many years that carries on to do. Why are we still doing that to each other? because the people in power tell us that that's acceptable. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I stop there because otherwise I'll just carry on going forever. You know me.
Well, Matt, I wanted to just ask a quick question. You don't have to answer now if there's no time, but so I love that example with the depleted uranium, right? So how would you change the response to that issue? Because right now, what the response is, well, the people in power say it's fine, it's not an issue, it's insignificant, it'll whatever, right? But how would you change that response? Because if somebody says,
One
well,
word.
I disagree, they're going to point finger and point big sticks, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you say one word, Matt?
Yeah, you know that word. Democrat.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yay. Cool.
So,
It goes with compassion, empathy, yes. Mhm.
yes. So, a platform for stating issues and solutions from each of us, and each of us is I think something that was really prevalent in all of this is seeing when we see the person on the blunt end of the stick, that they are defending their own sacrality as well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, unifies us. And that's the thing that makes us, Matt, human, makes us like we are actually in our essence, trying to do the right thing. But we see something other, and that's escalated in our society, in our media, because we have and this is me putting this in here, but because we have a tendency to be exposed to the differences, and only the differences, and maybe not all of the differences, and certainly not all of the unifications.
Yeah.
We're not separate. We are all part of this. When we're separated, it makes us feel very small. But when we're all together, we're not very small, are we?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Love it.
In conclusion, what do we have going forward that we can look forward to? What's your hope?
Well, I had this thing which is like hopelessly idealistic, or so I used to think, which is that the sacrality of everyone should count equally, which on a meta-ethical perspective, on a subconscious perspective, it's all very legitimate.
Mhm.
That each one of us has the inherent human right to their sacred resting place that no one else can interfere with or violate, and it's very realizable. My problem is more with the people who fight so hard for it not to be realizable, because you're not, that meta-ethical state is not damaging to anybody at all. It's like what Matt said earlier, like every person should have a right to eat from the tree of life. From what the example you gave was very beautiful, and that doesn't take away anything from anybody else, even though people are convinced it will take away something from them, but it does not, right? That's the fact. It does not, because nature and human beings were created to live in harmony with each other. And that's also a fact that no one can change no matter how hard they try. So my hope is just that, or democry, well, that humanity will just come to this realization that it's not idealism, it's not people taking away from you, it ends up with somebody having more than me anyway, and all of that nonsense. It's scarcity is created by people who point the big stick. Scarcity in itself, again, does not exist because creation was harmonious and always is. Even in the biggest perceived scarcity, creation is still harmonious. It's just not perceived that way. So that's my hope. It's that humanity should just come to that realization, which is so simple. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? What's your hope for humanity, for the earth? What is your hope?
I'll go next. So my hope for humanity is people. Just in the sense of people are definitely the solution. And we are told that people are the problem. And we're told that we specifically, every moment of our lives, are the problem. And everything that we do creates a problem. Except it doesn't. What creates a problem is just what Dr. Maria was saying a minute ago, that we are told that that is the problem. It's fundamental to our belief system that we believe in something, and quite often that thing is something that's misconstrued or misdirected or misrepresented or misinformation, to use the buzzword of the moment, when in fact what we should be paying attention to is what people need, what people want, and what makes more people exist. Whether that's because people live longer, because we're not killing people in stupid, pathetic wars in the name of things like democracy, when clearly it isn't, to point a pointy stick at a problem. And instead, think about what people want, what people really need, and how to make that solution happen. It's not rocket science, it's very simple. If it wasn't very simple, I wouldn't be able to think about some of the things that I think about. And just like everybody else on this planet, I'm capable of thinking about it because we all know the truth, which is that things aren't the way that they're supposed to be. So my hope is that people are the solution going forwards, not the problem, because that is going to be the change that makes the difference. Instead, believe in the power of people to make change. That's my hope.
Mm-hmm. What other hopes?
So my hope is that that people start realizing and understanding that we are all interconnected, that we're not separate. This, you know, we live in these beautiful physical bodies in this amazing, beautiful world, and that we're all interconnected. You know, I feel like that's important because when we realize that, when we're all, you know, whatever I do to myself, I'm doing to my neighbor. Whatever I do to my neighbor, I'm doing to myself. And so if we can start like realizing that, start coming to that understanding that as human beings that we are all interconnected, and in even further out that we are actually all interconnected with all of life, not just with humans, but with like the animals and the plants and everything around us, then we have this we're recognizing that when we hurt ourselves, we hurt the earth. When we hurt the earth, we hurt ourselves in the process. And in doing that, there is a sacredness, in realizing how we are interconnected, how we may have different beliefs or come from different backgrounds. We may not necessarily always look at things the same. We may come from different countries, but I feel like that matters so much, because if we can do that, maybe, just maybe, taking little steps forward, that would allow us to be able to get along better. That would allow us to be able to realize, oh, well, you're not so different from me, and that we can there's a commonality where, we can love people more, get along with people more, have more peace, have a lot less war, a lot less fear, a lot of things that are so prevalent and so heavy in the world today. So I think that's one of my biggest hopes.
A sense of the sacred, a sense of the self, belief in the self, and a sense of connection. All of these things are incredibly important, and what I also wish for each person, each animal, and the connection for every human, every plant, the air, the water, the fire. All of it is part of what we're talking about, is our place here in the energy. When we have that sense, when we don't ignore that sense, we have a sense of how we can be responsible. How can we take self-responsibility? It's the only person we can be responsible is ourselves. But how that is connected to everyone and everything, and all right here on the earth, our home. So I want to thank you each for being here, and welcome you to the next roundtable, any other roundtables that we have. I appreciate you. And I want to let the audience know that we'll also have everybody's information down in the show notes. So you can connect in with the local healing and healing of self aspect of this in Jocelyn, and in the political and literary aspect of this in Maria, and in the mobilization aspect of this with Matt, and with moving forward and joining together here and getting everybody's ideas here on the Joyful Path. So thank you very much for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for that roundtable discussion. We have a lot that we can do right from home and right from ourselves. And it isn't easy, but it's good, joyful work. So if you want to be involved in this, first of all, make sure that you hit like if you like this conversation, and be sure to gently push the subscribe button so that you won't miss any other episodes. You can find the information for the people involved in this conversation down in the show notes. And you can also connect with me. My information is above, and also some down in the show notes. So if you have anything to add to this conversation, please put it in the conversation below. And also give us a shout if you know somebody, and maybe it's you, who belongs on this show, because you have made an impact by being on the joyful path and lifting yourself. And in lifting yourself, you lift others around you now. So I would be happy to talk to you if you are on a joyful path. Appreciate you, and I will see you next week. Ciao.